Every few months, the world rediscovers the same problem. Oil prices spike, shipping costs surge, supply chains slow down, and somewhere in the coverage, the same places keep appearing. The Strait of Hormuz, the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait, and the Suez Canal. 3 narrow waterways, all inside or beside the Middle East, all unstable, and all deeply connected to how the modern world moves energy, trade, and military power. Most people treat these as separate crises, but they're not. They're symptoms of the same geographic reality. Because the Middle East is not just a region. It's the only land corridor connecting 3 continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. And for thousands of years, every empire, navy, trade network, and energy system eventually collided here. Not because the Middle East is unstable, but because the geography made this corridor impossible to bypass. The Middle East sits at the intersection of 3 continents: Europe to the northwest, Asia to the east, Africa to the southwest. And between them runs one of the most important movement corridors on Earth: trade, oil, gas, container shipping, naval deployments, undersea cables. Everything moving between the Atlantic world and the Indo-Pacific eventually compresses toward the same narrow routes. That matters because geography rewards shortcuts. The faster goods move between continents, the cheaper the world economy becomes. The more efficiently energy moves, the more stable industrial economies remain. And over time, the entire global system reorganized itself around the fastest possible routes through this region. That created enormous wealth, but it also created dependency. Because once trade compresses into narrow corridors, stability inside those corridors becomes globally important. And for thousands of years, empires fought to control this corridor, not because they all wanted the same thing, but because controlling this corridor meant controlling movement itself. Romans, Ottomans, British, Americans, different eras, different ideologies, the same geographic logic. Because choke points like these are rarely peaceful for long, especially when the entire world depends on them. The first of those is the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal cuts directly through Egypt, linking the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. Roughly 15% of global trade passes through it. Europe depends on it for goods arriving from Asia. Asia depends on it for access to European markets. Energy shipments move through it constantly. And because the canal became so efficient, the global economy reorganized itself around using it. That is a geographic trap. Suez didn't just shorten the world's shipping routes, it made them fragile. A waterway that saves 10 days of sailing only works if the narrow entrance feeding into it stays open. And that entrance sits further south, at another choke point. A narrow strait between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, called the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. In Arabic, it means the Gate of Tears. At its narrowest navigable sections, global shipping compresses into corridors barely wide enough to safely manage the traffic moving through them. Which means a conflict on the coastline of Yemen can suddenly affect shipping moving between Europe and Asia. And that's exactly what happened.
Yemen's Houthi rebels claim their most serious Red Sea assault to date.
As attacks intensified near the Red Sea, major shipping companies began rerouting vessels around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern edge of Africa. That added thousands of kilometers to journeys. Shipping times increased by 10 to 14 days. Fuel costs rose sharply. Insurance rates climbed. Supply chains slowed. And suddenly, one narrow strait beside Yemen started affecting delivery times, freight prices, naval deployments, and energy markets across continents. The geography was always there. The crisis just forced the world to notice it. A militia on the coastline of Yemen managed to disrupt trade between Europe and Asia because geography placed global commerce within missile range. That is the real lesson of Bab-el-Mandeb. Modern trade looks global, But physically, it still depends on a handful of narrow passages that can be threatened locally. And once shipping reroutes around Africa, the entire efficiency model behind Suez begins collapsing. Because these routes were never designed with redundancy. They were designed for speed. That makes them efficient in peace and fragile in crisis. Then comes the third choke point, the most dangerous one, the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, Hormuz is only about 33 kilometers wide, but the actual navigable shipping lanes inside it are far smaller, just a few kilometers across in each direction, with ships forced into tightly controlled corridors and no alternative route around them. And through those corridors passes roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply. This is the main export route for Gulf energy producers: Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Iran, and the UAE. Some of the most energy-critical infrastructure on Earth depends on ships passing safely through this single stretch of water every day. And Iran sits directly beside it. Not near it, beside it. Iran's coastline runs along the entire northern edge of the strait. Its islands sit inside and around the choke point itself. Keshem Island, Larik Island, Hormuz Island, all positioned close enough to monitor and threaten maritime traffic moving through the corridor. That geographic reality creates permanent leverage, not temporary leverage, not political leverage, geographic leverage. Because Iran does not need to physically close the strait forever. It only needs to make the world believe the strait is unstable. That alone affects oil prices, shipping behavior, naval positioning, and global markets. And the geography makes that threat credible. Fast attack boats, drones, coastal missile batteries, naval mines, all become more dangerous inside confined waterways where ships have little room to maneuver. Which means the global energy system now depends on stability inside one of the narrowest and most militarized maritime corridors on Earth. Iran's greatest weapon is not its military. It's the fact that the world's built its energy system beside Iran's coastline. And the coastline does not change. That's why Hormuz keeps returning to the center of global crises. Not because tensions suddenly appear there, but because the geography guarantees the strait will always matter. And once you step back, the larger pattern becomes obvious. The modern world has concentrated enormous amounts of trade and energy movement into a handful of ultra-efficient corridors running through the Middle East. That created prosperity, but it also created systemic vulnerability, because narrow corridors create chain reactions. A disruption near Yemen affects Europe. A crisis near Hormuz affects Asia. Instability in the Red Sea reshapes shipping worldwide. Local conflicts stop staying local. And suddenly, the conflict becomes bigger than the country it started in. The geography of the Middle East was always going to create leverage like this. What changed is that the modern world built itself around corridors running directly through it. These are not just waterways, they're switches. And that's why the world cannot leave the Middle East alone. The map keeps pulling it back.